for all that you can have production companies or the BBC or any other network saying we have a zero tolerance approach to inappropriate behaviour, up to a point you have a zero tolerance approach. Look, there'll be an awful lot of female staff in New Broadcasting House who will be pretty horrified if nothing happens.
And men think, oh, here we go again. Why is there this pile-on? Why is everyone suddenly finding this behaviour unacceptable when they've happily gone along with it for 20 years?
I want to apologise for any offence that I caused with my post yesterday and any upset I may have caused to a lot of people. I wasn't in a good headspace when I posted it. I've been under a huge amount of stress. A lot of emotion. I felt very alone, under siege yesterday when I posted it. It's obvious to me I need to take some time out now while this investigation is underway. I hope you understand, and I do hope that you will accept this apology.
Greg Wallace has apologised in case anyone was offended. And you heard his wording there. He felt stressed, emotional, and under siege.
It comes 24 hours after a post where the whole tone of voice, the whole timbre of the message, the whole kind of thrust of it was completely different. So which is the real Greg Wallace? Defiance on Sunday or contrite on Monday? Welcome to the Newsagents. It's John.
It's Emily.
And Greg Wallace posted yesterday morning, and, look, we have got phones. No one forces you to post anything at any moment. You can think about things before you decide to hit post. But Greg Wallace yesterday was clearly angry. He was clearly defiant, and the PR backlash has been immense. This is what he said yesterday.
And apparently now, I'm reading in the paper, there's been 13 complaints in that time. Now, in the newspaper, I can see the complaints coming from a handful of middle class women of a certain age, just from Celebrity MasterChef. This isn't right.
So that was the statement that kicked off a brand new furore yesterday. And the truth is, women don't want to speak out because they get called middle class and menopausal. And worse, they see that even if they do, nothing actually changes. And men think, oh, here we go again. Why is there this pile-on? Why is everyone suddenly finding this behaviour unacceptable when they've happily gone along with it for 20 years or 2 millennia or whatever you want to make your time frame of reference? And so you create a sense where actually you have these flame-ups, these moments, these questions that surround: is Greg Wallace going to be fired? Is the episode going to be aired? Is the BBC going to take further action? And then nothing really happens at all.
Well, I want to just dwell a moment on the difference between Sunday and Monday, because he says in the latest statement that we played at the very top of the podcast that he was not in a good headspace, and that, it all sounded like he felt like I was under pressure, I was, by myself, la la la. Actually, playing what he said on Sunday, he had carefully worked out what he wanted to say. And I'm trying to figure out, one, whether the difference between Sunday and Monday is just the PR backlash.
Certainly.
And being told by the BBC, listen, mate, there is no coming back from this if you are trying to poke the people in the eye that are making the complaint. And the other thing, if I was just to be a little bit picky, is the non-apology apology. I apologise if anyone has taken offence. Isn't the issue not whether people have taken offence what you said on Sunday? It's whether they've taken offence over the way you have behaved in the past that has led to these complaints.
Look,
and that he is not apologising for in this latest statement.
There was a dog whistle in both of those recordings, if you listen carefully. The first time he's talking about middle-aged women. The second time he's talking about being under siege. That is a siren call to men to come to his defence because, in his imagination, if you don't back me up, they're coming for you next. See these Harridans, they'll come for you. See these people, they'll come for you. You'll be out of a job next. It's exactly the same kind of victim culture blaming that Trump has used a million times, which is I'm taking the flak now, but if I'm not there, then it'll all be on you. And I think each time women are kind of like, what is the point of speaking out about this stuff? Because, yeah, you might get kind of pushed aside for a month, or you might be out of a job, but you're not going to be cancelled. You're going to come back richer. You're going to get another deal somewhere else on a different platform. You're going to have a lot of people backing you up now because they think that you were unfairly treated. There was no crime. This is what his lawyers keep telling us, and it's absolutely true. There has been no, as we can see, crime committed on set. It's just about making people feel uncomfortable. And you could just say, well, who's to say whether you don't make me feel uncomfortable or I don't make you feel uncomfortable? Who's now arbitrating whether we feel uncomfortable in a work environment? And so this is where I think it gets really complicated, because each time there is a case like this, take the case of Jeremy Clarkson, who literally slapped a producer, right? Got fired from the BBC management in charge then, and goes off and does a very, very successful alternative show.
Made a fortune
Richer than ever, right? So people don't really get cancelled from this kind of stuff.
It's such an interesting area, and I say this as an older man and not having to navigate being a teenager or 25 again or whatever it happens to be. But you can see the seeds of a movement, maybe more than seeds of a movement of activist men who say it's all gone too far and we're being stripped of our masculinity. We're not allowed to say things anymore. We've got to be politically correct the whole time. We are being feminized by the MeToo movement, and that you can't be a proper bloke anymore. It's unacceptable to be a hunter-gatherer. And whether it's Andrew Tate, or whether it's Jordan Peterson, or whether it's Donald Trump and the Pussygate stuff, saying it was just locker room banter and can everyone please grow up. I'm sure for an awful lot of young men it's quite hard to navigate what is acceptable. Can I go out with someone in the office or not, or is there an unequal power relationship, or whatever it happens to be. But I think the bigger picture, that somehow men are now the oppressed, strikes me as total bollocks. I just cannot see how, if you look at the power relationships in society still that exist, the idea that men are being done down or can't be men, it just seems to be slightly ludicrous as an argument.
If you told me a decade ago, in the sort of hunt for Harvey Weinstein, and obviously he's a convicted rapist, it's a totally, totally different circumstance. But if you told me when the Me Too movement first reared its head, that it would somehow be weaponised against the victims so successfly that actually it became quite helpful to the male cause, I would have thought you were absolutely batshit crazy, right? But I now look at the Me Too movement and think it's actually sort of helped men inversely, because it's sort of given them a platform to push back on.
I'm not sure. I think that's a really interesting argument, and I'm kind of trying to process it as you say it. Surely men are much more conscious now of where boundaries are where they weren't 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
I think young men are incredibly, to the point where they are they're petrified to say the wrong thing. They are petrified of getting cancelled. They're petrified of getting on the wrong side of the opposite sex, or maybe the same sex. They are genuinely, I think, much more nervous about where the boundaries lie, to the point where loads of them aren't even having sex because they just don't want to end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I don't think it has helped us move forward at all with what's happening in the workplace for loads of women, loads of the time. I just simply think that is an argument that raises its head and then it goes away and nothing changes.
I mean, interestingly, we've had 2 voice notes from people that we know have worked with Greg Wallace in the past, both men, both young men.
I worked with Gregg a few years ago, and what can I say about Gregg? Well, he is one of the most self-centered people I've ever met. The show has to be all about him. If you're on set and you're setting up, he couldn't have any silence whatsoever. He had to do one-liner jokes and it all had to be about him. You got to a point after the 5th joke where you thought, all right, he's going to give up. But he just kept going on and on and on. And if you didn't laugh at his jokes, he would often make you feel like a certain type of way. You know, like this went on for hours and hours. And one of the comments he said, he really wants to wrap up the shoot quickly in order to get back so he could fornicate with his young missus. He often had to try and point that out. I can't remember all of his jokes, but I do remember them making a lot of people uncomfortable. That's both male and female. And I would consider him certainly a bit of a bully. I've never met or worked with anyone like this in my whole entire life.
I also worked on the same shoot as the previous contributor and can confirm that Greg Wallace was extremely difficult and actually quite exhausting to work with, often refusing to follow crew direction in order to perform his very own one-man show. Whether it was nerves or something else, he was providing a near constant stream of one-liners ranging from the harmless, "My wife hates when I pour her a glass of wine, I like to add fruit and juice, now she's sangria than ever," to wisecracks of a more graphic nature. "Why don't you wear Ukrainian underwear? Because Chernobyl fallout." These weren't Bond-esque off-the-cuff quips, and he's certainly no Stephen Wright. It was a seemingly never-ending exhaustive barrage of pre-prepared lines which went on for hours and hours, some of which danced a very fine line, and his demeanour throughout made our jobs far more difficult than necessary. I'd characterise his behaviour as bizarre rather than malicious from my recollection, and it certainly wasn't criminal, but there was a very clear sense of desperation coming off him in getting the laughs he craved, approval from everyone present, and it sort of created this tense atmosphere which you can totally see intimidating some people. I actually felt a bit sorry for him by the end of the day, although it did take a more malign turn when he loudly demanded that we, the crew, hurried up so he could, quote, get back to his country manner because he has a wife half his age, a comment which made most people skin crawl. The allegations made against him will come as no surprise to anyone who's spent time with him, and although I personally didn't feel like I'd been bullied, harassed or intimidated at all, I can very easily see why people would take exception to his Roy Chubby Brown shtick.
The thing is,
I mean, we should say that they were part of crews, right? They worked on, as part of the crew, on the set. They were being paid. They were freelancers, essentially, right?
and that is the key why maybe so few people have come forward. If you are a freelance, you are absolutely dispensable. You are going from week contract to week-long contract, possibly out of work at a moment's notice. So when the big star presenter walks onto the set and starts cracking those jokes, you are under a certain amount of power obligation to laugh and go, ha, 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 that was really funny, when you think, what a toss. And I think that is the reality. And for all that you can have production companies or the BBC or any other network saying we have a zero tolerance approach to inappropriate behaviour, up to a point you have a zero tolerance approach. Up to a point. Because you know that the star brings in ratings, and ratings equals money or justification for a licence fee, and that is why you kind of move very warily.
I also think it opens up a can of worms, right? Which is, if suddenly we're not tolerating this behaviour from Greg Wallace, then are you really going round to ask all your members of staff if they've tolerated that kind of behaviour from other stars or other celebrity chefs? There's a whole host of celebrity chefs whose behaviour probably hasn't been immaculate on set, right? So who do they go for next? Do you start, does zero tolerance mean we're actively looking to see what is going on here? Or does it just mean we'll deal with it when it's staring us in the face and all over the headlines? I think the comedy thing or the jokes thing is really important to sort of recognise as well, because people like Greg Wallace assume that they're really funny and that women aren't laughing because they're prudish.
Or have got no sense of humour.
Got no sense of humour, right? Isn't that the thing? You always get And actually, women don't laugh because they don't find it funny enough. I mean, it's that simple. So you create this place where, either if you're on the set, either you don't laugh and then you kind of you look like you're the saddo because you're not entering the spirit of fun, or else you do laugh because you don't want to get singled out for not laughing, in which case he's like, you see, we all had a laugh, banter, bants, and you're sort of stuck in it either way.
It's worth also considering the government attitude to all of this, because Downing Street has weighed in this morning. I think before the apology came, but nevertheless,
I mean,
the apology,
maybe preempting it.
saying that what Wallace had said and done was misogynistic and inappropriate, and wants the Culture Secretary to be speaking to the BBC. The BBC, in turn, has said we take any issues that are raised with us seriously and we have robust processes in place to deal with them. We are always clear that any behaviour which falls below the standards expected by the BBC will not be tolerated.
Well, I mean, that is honestly word salad. I'm sorry, but that is not telling us anything new about what they're going to do in this situation.
Well, I think the BBC will be agonising over what is the right thing to do, because look, there'll be an awful lot of female staff in New Broadcasting House who will be pretty horrified if nothing happens and there is no sanction against Greg Wallace and the complaints that were made years ago and raised by senior women who had appeared on the show, but apparently with no kind of big
honestly,
follow-up.
though, you say horrified, but actually, I don't think most women are horrified. I think they've kind of just subsumed all that stuff over and over again. We've all worked on sets, we've all worked in places where we've heard that stuff and you're kind of stuck there going, oh my God, am I going to be the person that goes forward? Am I going to be the person that makes the complaint? Or do I just take myself out of it? Do I just take myself away from it? Because why would you? Why would you put your name in the public space? I mean, huge, kudos to Kirsty Ward, my former colleague, who did do that. Kirsty's just stepped down as the lead presenter of Newsnight now and has clearly gone, sod it, if I'm not going to do it, who is? If I don't have a duty of care to the younger women coming after me, who does? Which is an incredibly impressive place to be. But you can see why. Loads of other women and these young men who don't want to be, named on our show just don't want to go there. Because how awful do you feel if nothing ultimately changes?
But if you're right in that, that is what makes a mockery of what Greg Wallace said on Sunday morning by saying it was just a few women of a certain age. It was a few women of a certain age because they were the ones who had the self-confidence, who dared. Whereas if you are a freelance and you're trying to pay the rent on your flat or whatever it happens to be, and you think if I say anything out of turn, it might mean that I'm off the show and haven't got any work for the next 6 weeks, I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
Davis at ABC News headquarters here in New York. We're coming on the air this hour with breaking news. President Biden has just pardoned his son Hunter on gun and tax charges that he was facing. The president reversed his previous position. He had long said that he would not pardon Hunter, expressing faith in the justice system and the rule of law.
This is a massive gesture from President Biden, and it will be one of his last. It involves going back on his word and doing something he repeatedly said he wouldn't, and that is to pardon his son Hunter for, as you've heard, tax and gun crimes. He's using the power of office, essentially an executive order, to grant a full and unconditional pardon to Hunter, and these are for criminal cases in both California and Delaware, which would, importantly, spare him from jail.
And it is a remarkable 180 turn from him that cannot be exaggerated. Can I just read you a bit of what Joe Biden's statement said? No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son. And that is wrong. There's been an effort to break Hunter, who's been 5.5 years sober, even in the face of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution. In trying to break Hunter, they've tried to break me, and there's no reason to believe it will stop here. Enough is enough. And he said, from my entire career, I followed a simple principle: just tell the American people the truth. They'll be fair-minded. But he says now that the justice system is broken. But this is a very difficult place for Joe Biden to be, given the charges that have been levelled against Donald Trump and what he might do to the justice system and the way he has treated the justice system himself. And so the charges of hypocrisy are going to ring loud. And just one other thing to add to it. The pardon has been drawn up in such a way as it is not just for these two offences for which he was awaiting prosecution. It is for anything he may have done in the past 10 years. In other words, when Donald Trump comes to office, and whoever may be his attorney general, once the kind of confirmation process has been through, can do nothing to look at Hunter Biden again.
This is an absolute Rorschach test. It's like the black and gold dress. You know, if you are from the MAGA side of things, you will turn around and say, oh, this just proves everything that we've always thought, which was that Donald Trump was being persecuted for crimes and that President Biden was always going to let his own son go free. If you are on the Democrat side, you'll say there is a maniac coming into the White House who wants to appoint people of the caliber of Matt Gaetz to be the head of justice. Matt Gaetz has now pulled out, but there are, as you know, similar candidates of that ilk behind him. And you have got to decide, as both a president and a father, whether you're going to let your son enter into a judicial system which is run by people you fundamentally do not trust with the rule of law. And I think that is weirdly where Biden has ended up. I mean, he says he doesn't want Hunter to go, he's a recovering addict. He doesn't want him to end up in prison back on drugs or addicted again. He doesn't want him to face a 25-year jail term for something that really should be a 3-year jail term. And I think what it speaks to is, if you believe in the rule of law, and I can't actually believe I'm sitting here saying this, but if Biden believed in the fairness of the rule of law, I don't think he would have done this. I think it suggests something deeply profound, which is the outgoing president no longer believes that America is going to do right by the law. And that is a terrifying sort of place to go.
Look, I reflect back to the debates you and I had over the prosecution of Donald Trump during the hush money trial, when all his kind of acolytes were out there outside the court in Lower Manhattan saying this is a witch hunt, this should never have been brought to charge, da-da-da-da-da-da. And we argued each time that actually the charges had been confirmed by a grand jury, the case had been put by the prosecution and Trump's case had been put by the defence, and 12 of Donald Trump's peers, the jury members, had decided on his guilt. So they had in Hunter Biden's case. And I just don't think it is good enough for Joe Biden to be able to say, yeah, Hunter, you walk free. Because now everyone in America believes that the justice system is weaponized. And you've now got Donald Trump talking about a miscarriage of justice having taken place because of what Joe Biden has decreed. Because normally the pardon comes after you've served a certain amount of your sentence, that you have been convicted and you've been put in prison or whatever, and then you are released by the presidential pardon. Hunter Biden has been found guilty, but there hasn't started any sentencing, and sentencing was due to happen in the next 2 weeks. And so it is a momentous thing that has done, which I just think further undermines people's faith in justice and the rule of law in America. And I just think it leaves it in a terrible
I'm sure
place.
He's going to be absolutely kicked in the face for this. And I understand why, for all the reasons you're laying out. But actually, let's return to the bigger picture, which was that the charges laid against Donald Trump, the convictions that he faces, were for a case that, I think we argued at the time, were probably, even though he was found guilty by a jury of his peers, were probably overdone and overcharged. Should they have gone after him for the fraud case when there were so many other things to go after him? But fundamentally, Donald Trump, we now know, will never face any kind of justice over the January the 6th incitation of riots. He'll never probably face that state case, the RICO case in Georgia, for literally trying to get an election official to overturn the results. These are big, big issues that have at stake American democracy, and he's never, ever going to face justice over those. So if you're asking whether the law is being weaponized, I think the moment he won the election, it was. Jack Smith, the special counsel, is out of a job and probably out of a country right now. Right?
Christopher Wray will soon be resigning as head of the FBI.
So what does that say? What does that say to you about the state of the rule of law right now in America? I mean, it feels kind of broken.
I think it is quite remarkable. Look, let's not pretend there was this virgin period prior to 2016 when everything was perfect with the American justice system.
Yeah.
It has always been political. It has always been politicised. There have always been appointments made to people in positions who are there because of their loyalty to the president
you could
rather
argue.
than their
Can I
ability.
just say, you could argue, and I know that there was some sort of discomfort between Biden and his Attorney General Merrick Garland, who went after, Hunter Biden for this in the first place. And actually, I think you could argue that at one point in this electoral cycle, Joe Biden thought he was making a pact with the devil. In other words, he would offer up Hunter Biden to suggest that there was fairness, that if Donald Trump was facing, allegations on the one side, that Joe Biden was going to be kind of purer than pure and say, look, my own son is in the justice system and he's going to face that. I think you've come to a place now where he's saying, sod it, actually, sod it. You got away scot-free. Why on earth should my son, be locked up for gun charges? And that's where he is.
Well, gun charges and tax fraud, for which one case he pleaded guilty and the other one he was found guilty. So, I mean, look, it is an evacuation of the moral high ground. People can say, well, they're all as bad as each other, which I kind of think is such a despairing sort of thing for people to feel about the political systems in which they live. Oh God!
So the alternative. Go on. You're President Biden, and you're saying, "Sorry, son, I've got to follow through." And it might be 3 years.
That's what he has said consistently. I'm not going to interfere, and now he has. But just while we're on the rule of law, I want to tell, if you can bear with me about 90 seconds, I want to tell you the story of a guy called Charles Kushner. He is the father of Jared Kushner, who is married to Ivanka Trump. Jared Kushner played a key role in the Trump White House. Charles Kushner was sent to prison, and the criminal offence that Charles Kushner had committed was that he set a honey trap for his brother-in-law, where he hired a prostitute. The prostitute was to lure the brother-in-law of Charles Kushner to a flat which he had wired up with cameras and microphones. Photos were taken of brother-in-law with prostitute, and he sends the photographs to his sister to blackmail her to hand over control of the property company that they had. He did that to his sister.
Incredible.
Donald Trump announced yesterday that Charles Kushner will be the next US ambassador to France. The French must feel so honoured by that.
If you haven't got a conviction, you're nobody. So how are we feeling after our debut, our live debut at the Royal Albert Hall?
Yeah, it's something I never thought would happen in a journalistic career. Being in front of a camera, fine. Being in a studio, fine. Pair of headphones on, fine. 5,500 people in front of you at one
Incredible.
Of Britain's most iconic venues, never thought would happen. It was great and it was lovely and it was fabulous that so many people came from across Britain to be there last night.
Mine was a 3 martini night.
Oh,
yes, you know what Dorothy Parker says about martinis.
Yeah,
before you end up under the host.
Okay,
so I got out just in time.
So you got out just in time.
Yeah.
It was a fabulous night, and we're pleased to announce that's not the end of it. We're going to be in Birmingham, Manchester, and Edinburgh in the new year.
We are properly on the road. We're going to Birmingham on the 17th of February, Manchester on the 24th of February, and Edinburgh, Usher Hall on the 11th of March. Please come and see us. We just loved seeing you. And we got close, didn't we? I'm sorry to that poor lady who was wearing the red scarf and the white T-shirt, who I called out so unjustly in the quiz. But we loved having you there.
You were hurling wine gums at people, packets of wine gums, and it was like being
gifts. I think gifts.
Yeah, that's like the Mardi Gras parade where you can get yourself really badly injured by people throwing things from the floats that are on. Anyway, the tickets go on sale tomorrow on the Global Player. We would love to see you in either Manchester, Birmingham, or Edinburgh.
And a huge thank you to all of you who came yesterday. You put big smiles on our faces.
Bye-bye. We'll see you tomorrow.
Now.
Bye.
Bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.